Welcome.
That was a good film. Yeah, the man who...
I'm delighted that you could all be here today. I am Siobhan Harlow. I'm a professor of epidemiology at the School of Public Health and also a professor of obstetrics and gynecology. I actually helped start the human rights program here on campus some 15 years ago, so I'm delighted to be back and hosting this particular event. Before I start, I would like to thank both Natasha and Brina, who have done so much to organize and make this day possible here, and also Professor Tsutsui, whom I'm sure I didn't pronounce his name correctly, who has offered to host this particular program and bring our guests to you here today. We have many sponsors for the day's events, including the Human Rights Program, the School of Nursing, Global Reach, from the medical school, the Global Public Health Program, and also the William Davidson Institute. So today I'm going to first give a little bit of background for those of you who may not know as much about the Congo context. And then I will introduce both Professor Mukwege and Mike Ramsdell. Mike will then speak for a few minutes, and then Dr. Mukwege will speak for a few minutes, but we would really like this to be a dialogue. So we will be opening it up fairly soon to questions. I'd like to take questions from the undergraduates first, so begin thinking of your questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor to others in the room. So as far as a little bit of background, what is known as the First Congo War in 1996 and 1997 was ultimately triggered by the destabilization in eastern Zaire following the Rwandan genocide that I'm sure many of you have heard about, but maybe not the implications of that for Congo. Up to 1.5 million refugees actually settled in eastern Zaire. And the subsequent invasion of Zaire that was actually led by Rwanda in support of the rebel forces ultimately replaced the then dictator Mobutu Sese Seko with the rebel leader Laurent Desire Kabila. And Zaire was renamed to what we know today as the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Second Congo War, which is also known as the Great War of Africa or the African World War, began in August 1998, just a little more than a year after the First Congo War ended, and involves some of the same issues. Although a peace agreement was signed in 2002, and the war officially ended in 2003, violence has continued in many regions of the country, especially in the east. Named the deadliest war in modern African history, the Second Congo War directly involved 9 African countries, as well as approximately 20 separate armed groups. By 2008, the war and its aftermath had caused over 5.4 million deaths, making it the deadliest conflict worldwide since World War II. Another 2 million were displaced from their home. This war and its aftermath of continuing armed conflict is notorious not only for the number of lives lost, but also for the widespread systematic use of rape as a war tactic. In the eastern region, more than 80% of the population was displaced, with more than 1 million people relocating into the city of Bukavu, where about half of the population has family members who have lost their lives in the violence, and over 1/5 of the women have been raped. So imagine here, 1 in 5 women in this room. Eastern Congo is rich in mineral wealth, not only diamonds and gold, but also copper and the rare minerals required for the manufacture of cell phones and tablets and the electronics that we use so much today. Critical for us is that this illegal trade in conflict minerals has helped to drive the war, and to a great extent, it foments the continuing conflict today. We're delighted to have with us today, speaking together for the first time, Professor Denis Mukwege and Director Mike Ramsdell, and are grateful to our own Dr. Tim Johnson, who will be translating for Dr. Mukwege today. Professor Denis Mukwege is the world-renowned gynecological surgeon who's the founder and medical director of the Panzi Hospital in Bukavu. He founded in 1999 the hospital as a clinic for gynecological and obstetric care, but he and his staff have subsequently treated more than 30,000 survivors of the extreme sexual violence. The hospital engages a 5-pillar holistic healing model that includes physical care, psychological support, community reintegration services, legal assistance, and notably, education and advocacy to address the root causes of violence. Dr. Mukwege is the recipient of numerous honorary degrees and awards for his advocacy against sexual violence as a weapon of war and for his outstanding services to the survivors of rape, including the UN Human Rights Prize in 2008, our own University of Michigan Wallenberg Medal in 2010, the Sakharov Prize for the Freedom of Thought in 2014, and most recently, on just September 1st, 2016, he was named the Seoul Peace Prize laureate. Dr. Mukwege works tirelessly to increase protections for women and to advocate that those responsible for sexual violence be brought to justice, including the Congolese government and militia groups who continue to terrorize and commit systematic rape in the Eastern Congo. So here we must stop and ask, as Dr. Mukwege does, why? Mike Ramsdell's film, When Elephant Fights, explores the connection between resource extraction and conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Mr. Ramsdell is a native of our own Flint, Michigan, and he formed Under the Hood Productions with the goal of creating films that inform and advance the collective conscience of today. This film spotlights how the complicity of multinational corporations and corrupt politicians threaten human rights and perpetuate the deadly conflict in the DRC. And we hope that you will join us today at 5:30 at the new School of Nursing building for one of the first viewings of this important film. There's some flyers in the back for you. So it is the coming together of these two individuals that's critical here today. They attest to the linkage between the conflict perpetuated over mineral wealth and the ongoing acts of rape with extreme violence in Eastern Congo. Conflict here is not an abstraction. It is a daily action that plays out on the bodies of individual Congolese women and children. As Professor Mukwege argues, it is not sufficient to provide health services to repair the physical trauma. We must heal the whole community, seek justice, and address the underlying cause of ongoing strife and human rights abuses, taking responsibility both locally in the Congo and more broadly here at the University of Michigan for our roles in perpetuating this conflict. So now I would like to welcome Mike Ramsdell to offer some thoughts, and then followed by some words by Dr. Mukwege.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. First, I would like to thank the University of Michigan and everybody who's made this happen. And I would especially like to thank Dr. Mukwege for making the time to be here. You have an incredibly busy schedule. I don't know if you remember, we met, 4 years ago when I came in with a camera. In case you guys don't know, you are sitting in a room with Superman. And what you also don't know is that he brought with him Wonder Woman, Nama Haviv right here, who is his right-hand woman. And I've just embarrassed her immensely. But if you want to know what modern-day superheroes look like, it is these two right here. So this is primarily a human rights. You guys are primarily here on a human rights issue, correct? That's what the thrust of today is about. So, as was said, my film, the reason I decided to make films is because you can get more people in a room to sit down and be quiet in a film than you can in any other medium that's available. And because storytelling is what I like to do, so I thought, okay, well, let me use that skill set for what I think is most important. But to get right down to the brass of where we are, and there's a lot of people in this room who are as capable or more capable of speaking about this than me, JD, Garrett, Nama, Dr. Mukwege. The big question you have in a humanitarian issue is, to be quite blunt, how do you get people to care? How do you get people to move the resources necessary to do anything about it? And the unfortunate reality of a place like Congo or a place like Sudan is that what makes the Western world tick is what is our interest in this? Do we have a strategic interest like we do in Syria? Do we have a financial interest like we do in the Middle East? No. So what's our interest? It's a humanitarian interest. Well, How am I gonna move the resources necessary? How am I gonna spend the money necessary? How am I gonna get the support I need to do anything about a place that doesn't really have any immediate need for us? And that's the real dilemma that anybody who enters into the human rights world faces, is how do I get people to care? And once they do care, how do I get them to take the steps that are actually productive to bring something like that about? And so when With Elephants Fight, we took the history of Congo back to 1996, but you can take the history of Congo back significantly further, and you can tie a narrative. And I will no means say that the resource extraction is the only issue in Congo or is a silver bullet to fix anything, but the narrative of the conflict in Congo cannot be, resource extraction cannot be removed from that narrative. And so if you go back to the Berlin Conference in 18, whenever it was, when the Western world got together and parted up Africa, that was their intention. And King Leopold said, I want Congo. And he made a fortune. A fortune. When you travel around Belgium today, you can still see the ramifications of that fortune. He made a fortune off of ivory and rubber. And has been reported that it killed approximately half of the Congolese population during the time, almost 10 million people. And that's where Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness came from. When Joseph Conrad wrote The Heart of Darkness, he wasn't speaking about the darkness in Congo or the darkness in Africa. He was speaking about the darkness in the Belgian warlords who were overseeing everything. And then in 1960, Congo had its first democratically elected president, Patrice Lumumba. But the Belgians at that time had so much interest in the mining in the south of the region that they couldn't stand for that. And the United States had so much interest in the region because of the Cold War, they couldn't stand for that. And so Lumumba was assassinated, the minerals stayed under control of the West, and we put in Mobutu Sese Seko. And Mobutu made a fortune off of the minerals in Congo. Kept the country in poverty, kept the infrastructure to a minimum. It was actually a strategic plan of his that if people can't communicate with each other, Congo is a huge country and very difficult to get across. And that was absolutely intentional, that he kept that infrastructure minimized so that people couldn't communicate with each other. And then we move on to 96. And then we move on to the AFDL and Laurent Kabila coming in, and the Congolese people supported the AFDL. And okay, well, to a certain degree, I don't want to speak for all the Congolese people, we can have our own leader. And then Kabila was assassinated. And then there's been neighboring countries and other interests and multinational groups who realize there's still a fortune to be made in Congo. And that's what When Elephants Fight is about. And that's the reason the film is titled When Elephants Fight, is because that seemed to me, the proverb, the African proverb, Congolese proverb is, when elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. And that, to me, seemed the best analogy for the history of Congo, is that the people of Congo have been the grass that has suffered over these elephants with very specific interests that had very little to do with their well-being and very much to do with what they could get out of the country. And so here we are today with the situation in Congo, and now the violence is erupting again as Kabila, the president of Congo, is not with letting go of power. And if you think that is not related to the fact that he is making a fortune off of the country, that those who have very specific interests in the mining industries in that country are directly linked to Kabila, and if we let go of this gentleman, then who comes in next? There's a huge financial interest to be lost in that. And so now Kabila's bucking the Constitution, and the Congolese people aren't standing for it. And who knows what's going to happen, but the last 3 days have been ugly enough. And so as humanitarians, we have to find a message that moves the right people, that moves the world, we have to figure out who are the players that we can get to do something about this, and how, in goodness gracious name, do we move them. The other complicated issue we face is how do we, my film uses words like supply chain responsibility, and I'll give you a brief breakdown of the economics of the country, and then we'll get back more into the humanitarian issue. So in the east of Congo, there are a lot of artisanal mines. Artisanal mines would be where guys grab shovels and picks and go whatever and go dig out, and you get coltan, you get tungsten, you get tantalum, which is coltan, you can get diamonds, you get gold, but you get pockets full. I mean, there's massive amounts, but it's done artisanally. Because they're all over the place and they're ad hoc, they're incredibly complicated to govern, to regulate, and there's very little infrastructure to do that in the first place, so a lot of illicit players are making money off of that and perpetuating conflict in that. And that's been a big history of Eastern Congo, is using those minerals, what have come to be termed as conflict minerals, to fund their campaigns. Minerals aren't the only thing. They also use charcoal, they use taxation, they use all kinds of things. But minerals obviously is a very abundant resource for them to make money off. In Katanga, that's where the big industrial mining happens. That's where the big copper belt, the second largest copper belt in the world, runs through southern Congo. And so copper is a massive resource, and also comes with it as cobalt. And so their corporations are making billions of dollars. The humanitarian issue paid a lot of attention to what's happening in the East, but the big money is being lost in southern Katanga. Global Witness and Africa Progress Panel did a report that $1.5 billion in just 5 deals was lost to the Congolese people in southern Congo. That's more than twice of what the Congolese government spends on health and education in 1 year. So it's a massive amount of money that's being lost to them. So what my film talks about is transparency in mining contracts, supply chain responsibility, and how these are so necessary. And what I'm so excited about being able to sit here with Dr. Mukwege for is because people put those in 2 pockets. Women are being raped. That's awful. That goes in pocket A. Transparency in the mining corporation. That goes in pocket B. They put you into 2 different people. You got to go talk to this guy, and you got to go talk to this guy. And as was said in the introduction, what needs to happen is we need to understand that the transparency, that the illicit mining deals, that the situations in the East, those are what's causing the fire. Dr. Mukwege is doing everything he can and a human being could be asked of to deal with the burn victims. And so, of course, we can continue to just throw resources at the burn victims and try to help them, or we can shift the attention and try to legitimately put out the fire. And that is the really complicated issue, because right now, Congo is not a strategic nation to the United States. Right now, we don't have strategic interests militarily. Right now, we don't have strategic interests financially. There is a little bit of, that can be taken a little bit deeper, but we'll just hold it as it's not enough of a strategic interest to move away from Syria. It's not the same thing as say, Somalia is. And so that's the really big question. We have this massive humanitarian crisis with American Western corporations profiting off of it, making profits from the situation that's helping perpetuate it. And we're trying to get people to pay attention. And that will be, if you enter into the human rights world, that will be your biggest struggle, is how do you find the levers that make people care, that make people understand this is something we need to move on. That'll be me kind of putting out there what I think the issues are, and then we can get into a dialogue. But I would really like to stop talking and hand it over to Dr. Mukwege now.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely.
So, Professor Mukwege, given the years of exploitation by foreign governments, by the Congolese government, by rebel groups, how, from your perspective as a physician and a peace advocate, has this exploitation impacted women?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Je suis désolé que je ne peux pas prendre mon intervention en anglais après un éloquent parleur comme Mike a fait pour présenter la situation. Je crois qu'il a fait tellement bien que je préfère parler en français pour essayer de l'approcher par rapport à son éloquence.
So I'm sorry that I can't give such an eloquent exposition in English as Michael just did, and please give me the opportunity to try to articulate in French that I'm more comfortable with the feelings that I have about this situation.
Dans le monde, à chaque fois qu'on a été indifférent, on sait que les conséquences de l'indifférence ont été très graves et ont fait honte à notre humanité.
So every time we have been indifferent in the world, we know that the consequences have been severe and that humanity has been shamed by its indifference.
Et je crois que lorsque les droits humains sont violés, on ne doit pas se poser la question où ça se passe, c'est quelle religion, c'est quelle race. On doit tout simplement se dire, nous partageons la même humanité et je dois me lever pour protéger l'humanité commune que je partage avec celui qui subit l'abus.
So whenever human rights abuses happen, we shouldn't ask what religion or what political parties or what's causing this. We should ask what are the basic human rights that we all share what are the basic human things that we care about that are causing these things to happen?
Ce qui se passe en République démocratique du Congo a plus de 100 ans.
What's been happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo for more than 100 years?
Mais ce qui a été le plus grave, c'est que tout le monde a toujours essayé de fermer les yeux, fermer les oreilles.
But the really bad thing is that everybody's really tried to both close their eyes and close their ears to what's been going on there.
Et lorsqu'on ferme les yeux et les oreilles, on laisse continuer l'abus des droits de l'homme.
And when we close our eyes and our ears, we let the abuse of human rights continue.
Si ça ne choque pas qu'on dise que plus de 5 millions de la population congolaise a été tuée les 20 dernières années, plus de 500 000, et personne ne sait d'ailleurs combien de femmes ont été violées, mais à notre hôpital aujourd'hui, avec les équipes mobiles, nous comptons plus de 50 000 femmes que nous avons pris en charge pour viol.
So if you think about it, there have been 5 million people who've been killed. There have been 500,000 women who've been assaulted, and in our hospital alone, there have been 50,000 women who've come to receive care.
Et je dois vous dire, tout ça, c'est comme si ça ne choque pas la conscience de notre humanité.
And all that happens, and our consciences don't seem to be shocked by these human rights
Il n'y a
abuses.
aucune action.
No action.
C'est l'inertie totale.
So it's just total lack of inertia.
La dernière fois quand j'ai rencontré le haut-commissaire aux droits humains,
Last time when I met the High Commissioner on Human Rights,
je l'avais d'abord félicité puisque son bureau a fait un travail fantastique.
first of all, I congratulated him because his organization's been working on a fantastic.
Ils ont inventorié 617 massacres, donc des abus de droits humains qui correspondaient aux crimes de guerre et crimes contre l'humanité.
They've documented 650?
617.
17,
No, 617.
617 human rights abuses that have specifically been addressed against the.
Donc, ils ont inventorié 617 crimes de guerre, crimes contre l'humanité.
Okay, so they've inventoried 617 crimes against humanity,
Et dans le rapport, ils disent même que ça peut constituer des crimes de génocide.
and they've documented in their documents that those 617, in fact, could be considered genocidal crimes.
Mais ce rapport est dans le tiroir des Nations Unies.
But that report is in the desk drawers of the United Nations.
Et donc, on fait comme si c'est un rapport qui a été fait, mais puisque certaines personnes qui sont à l'origine de ces crimes ont menacé les Nations Unies ont reculé.
But that report happened, but people who are in the report and who are indicted in the report have threatened the United Nations, and so the United Nations has just put the report away.
Et quand je posais la question, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, je crois que ça fait une honte pour nous tous.
And when I said to the High Commissioner, this is really shameful for all of us,
De continuer à parler de 5 millions de morts et il n'y a aucune investigation.
to think about the fact that there are 5,000 deaths and there's been 5 million deaths, and there's been no investigation.
Il m'a dit, pour le moment, c'est difficile, puisque nous demandions à ce qu'au moins on connaît les victimes, on connaît les auteurs, mais les auteurs sont protégés, leurs noms sont cachés, mais au moins les visages et les noms des victimes sont connus.
So we know the victims, and we know the perpetrators, and the perpetrators are well known, but the victims really are hidden, and so the perpetrators have been protected.
Il a dit, oui, si nous donnons le nom de ceux qui ont commis ces massacres, nous risquons de perdre donc le témoignage, nous risquons de perdre la trace de ceux qui ont. Nous devons protéger nos sources d'information. Donc des réponses qui ressemblent à dire ceux qui commettent les crimes peuvent être protégés.
So if we give the names of the people who perpetrated, we're likely to lose the witnesses and the name and the reports of the people who these bad things have happened with. So it's as if the perpetrators are protected because of this fear.
Et je pense que je voulais tout simplement mettre dans votre mémoire qu'aujourd'hui, ce qui est en train de se passer, c'est une répétition. Et la répétition est due à l'impunité.
So what I'd like to leave you with in your minds is that this is a repetition. This is something that's happening again, and it's happening again because of the impunity and the lack of accountability of the people in the past, so that this can happen again.
Et si ça se répète, c'est malheureusement les femmes et les enfants qui payent très très cher.
And as this gets repeated this time, it's women and children who are going to suffer, and who are going to be taken advantage of and who are going to lose out on this.
Et je crois que ça fait beaucoup de mal pour nous lorsque nous faisons face à ces drames que les femmes subissent, que les enfants subissent, et que nous sommes en train de crier, mais c'est comme si tout le monde fermait les oreilles, tout le monde fermait les yeux par rapport à ces crimes.
And these crimes that are being, very dramatic crimes that are being held against women are things that we should recognize, but because we close our ears and because we close our eyes, these dramatic, horrific crimes just aren't being paid attention to.
Elle a demandé quel est l'impact sur les femmes. Moi, je crois que ce que je vois, on voit l'aspect physique du traumatisme, mais l'aspect psychologique est très très profond et peut-être le plus difficile à soigner.
So people ask me, so what's going on with women? And obviously the physical impact of this is significant, but even more profound is the psychological implications, and it's something that we just don't seem to pay as much attention to.
Mais lorsqu'on considère également la destruction du tissu social, c'est-à-dire c'est pas seulement la victime qui est détruite, mais c'est tout le tissu social. Lorsque la femme est violée en présence de ses enfants, de son mari, ou un bébé de 12 mois est violé et que les parents voient les lésions, ça crée une destruction du tissu social qui après vous avez des comportements qui sont tout à fait anormaux.
So when you think about the destruction of the social tissue, the things that hold society together, then what's happening is that this is playing out in the bodies of children, 12-month-old children that are being attacked, and the tissue of the children is tearing them apart. And so what's happening to women and children is actually tearing apart society, and the destruction and the tearing apart of bodies of mothers and children is actually tearing apart social fabric.
Et donc, en République démocratique du Congo, ce que je suis en train de voir, même après les conflits, on voit très très bien que le fait qu'on ne s'est pas occupé du drame, la métastase s'est faite dans la société. Et en fait, c'est une société qui est tout simplement en décomposition, puisqu'il n'y a plus de valeur. Parce qu'un enfant qui a vu sa mère violée, vous ne pouvez pas lui demander quelle est la valeur qu'il peut respecter, etc. Et on voit tout simplement que la métastase s'est faite dans la société qui est en train de se décomposer progressivement.
So what's happening is that these terrible things that are happening to the bodies of children and women are metastasizing into society as a whole. And the society is becoming inured to these terrible things that they're seeing. And so the bodies of children and women become part of the destruction of society, and society becomes inured to it and doesn't even understand how these things that are happening to children and mother are actually destroying the society itself.
Ce qui est le plus grave, c'est ce que Mike a très bien dit. Il n'y a pas que les mines, mais malheureusement, ce qui entretiennent ces combats, c'est les ressources naturelles du Congo.
And what Michael has shown so well is that it's not just the mines, but it's the natural resources of the Congo itself that are keeping these things going.
Et puisque nous sommes tous incapables de dire, nous aimons tous, moi aussi je tiens beaucoup à mon téléphone, et nous tous nous y tenons, mais nous pouvons avoir les produits qui sont ici, nous pouvons les avoir propres, si nous avons cette volonté.
So what we don't recognize is that these natural resources in Congo are in telephones and things that we hold dear. and we don't understand that these conflict minerals are in fact something that are very important to us, and that what's happening to women is actually in our lives as well as we carry around our cell phones and these other products.
Et donc, je ne peux pas vous dire de jeter votre téléphone.
But I can't tell you to throw away your telephone.
Mais ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que nous sommes capables, tous ensemble, d'exiger à ce que, comme consommateurs, on puisse consommer des produits propres.
But what I can say is that all of us who are consumers of these products need to demand that we're consuming products that are appropriately made and that are the result of this kind of conflict.
Et ça, nous avons la possibilité, la capacité de le faire.
And that we can do ourselves together.
70%, 80% des produits qui se trouvent dans nos téléphones viennent de ces zones où les femmes sont humiliées, où les femmes sont détruites, où les enfants ne comprennent pas pourquoi leur corps doit être détruit de la façon dont leur corps est détruit.
So 70 to 80% of the products of our phones are coming from places where the bodies of women are being destroyed, where the bodies of children are being destroyed, and where children don't understand and can't understand why this is happening to their mothers and to themselves.
Merci d'être là.
Thank you very much for being here today.
Et je pense que nous allons faire une discussion qui peut nous permettre d'être des véritables défenseurs des droits de l'homme, puisque le droit de l'homme abusé ailleurs, c'est mon droit qui est abusé. Merci.
Thank you very much for your time, and I think that we can all be representative of human rights, because the human rights of people in other places are the human rights of people everywhere. Thank you.
So we'd like to open it up to questions. First from, yeah?
You could just wait for the mic. Hi there. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm Maren McDivitt. I'm an undergraduate. So this is for Dr. Mukwege, but I'd love if any other people had an opinion. So Dr. Mukwege, you've received so many humanitarian awards, and often you're traveling in the West when you're not working in the Eastern Congo. You're traveling in the West receiving awards, giving lecture tours, like you're here today. When you came for the Raoul Wallenberg Award in 2010, you were back. What do you feel is the role of those sorts of Western-focused humanitarian awards or human rights awards that are often given to people working in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East? Do you feel like the West is really worthy, or it's appropriate for us to be the judges of who is working in human rights? Do we have such a great human rights record that we are worthy of giving humanitarian awards and not necessarily receiving them?
Bon, je pense que d'abord, je vais répondre par rapport au prix que je reçois.
So first of all, we're going to talk about the prizes that I've won.
Il fut un moment où vraiment je disais ça ne sert à rien.
There was a time when I thought that they're not worth anything.
Et je m'étais dit, mais pourquoi je dois recevoir des prix si la violence doit continuer?
And I was wondering, well, how can I receive awards if the violence is going to continue?
Comment je peux recevoir les prix et je continue à soigner des bébés qui sont détruits?
How can I continue to receive rewards and at the same time continue to take care of babies whose bodies have been destroyed?
Mais ce que j'avais découvert, c'est que j'avais l'impression que tout le monde connaissait ce que je connaissais au bloc opératoire, alors qu'en réalité, très très peu de gens savent ce qui se passe.
And then I came to understand that I thought that everybody knew and everybody understood what I was seeing every day in the operating room. And then I came to understand that that wasn't the case, that people didn't know the story, that didn't know what I was seeing every day in the hospital.
Je crois que Tim, c'est non seulement mon héros, mais c'est mon coach. Je l'admire beaucoup pour le travail formidable qu'il fait en Afrique pour soutenir les gynécologues obstétriciens d'autre part.
So Dennis said that he's enjoyed working together with me because some of the work that I've done in Africa to train doctors is something that that he respects as well.
Et je pense que peut-être il y a des gens comme Tim ou Mike qui sont informés et qui voient que c'est grave, mais leur voix ne traverse pas peut-être plus loin.
Yeah. So there are people like me and people like Mike who see what's going on, and even our voices don't get heard very well because we just don't get out there and tell people what's going on.
Et donc moi je pense qu'aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas se porter comme un juge ou se porter comme responsable, mais je pense que la responsabilité des droits humains, elle est d'abord individuelle, puisque tout ce que vous ne voudrez pas qu'on fasse à vous, vous devez penser que l'autre aussi ne voudrait pas qu'on le fasse pour lui. Et la deuxième chose, c'est que cette responsabilité individuelle doit devenir collective et globale pour permettre à ce que nous puissions avancer dans les droits humains.
So I've come to understand that human rights is really two things. First of all, it's that we need to understand that the way we want to be treated is the way that other people want to be treated, and there's an individual responsibility to understand that human rights are an individual issue. But secondly, those individual collective understandings of what human rights is have to become a collective understanding, and that collectively, all together need to be working on human rights, understanding that it's a group process.
Et je pense qu'aujourd'hui, j'ai dit, comment nous pouvons toujours parler de la globalisation économique alors qu'on parle très peu de la globalisation, donc de l'universalité plutôt des droits humains.
And I come to understand that we talk so much about the economic importance of human rights, of globalization. We talk a lot about globalization and the economy, and we don't talk enough about the globalization and how important human rights are in globalization.
Et donc je pense que vraiment, pour moi, c'est une responsabilité et je suis très très heureux d'être dans cet auditoire puisque je pense que vous serez des acteurs, des actrices demain et je crois que nous devons apporter cette universalité de droits humains à tous les niveaux.
So I'm actually really glad to be here with you today because I think all of you in the future can become actors in human rights, and it's really all of our responsibility to carry forward with this global view of the importance and criticality of human rights.
Okay. Je vous en prie.
I'm going to just first take from the student in the back and then
Hi, I'm a graduate student in the School of Information and School of Public Health. My question, I have a two-part question. My first question would be, how is technologies playing into a factor currently in Congo? I'm not really well educated. I don't know what Congo is doing right now with information systems and infrastructure. And I was wondering like how Congo is currently in that field. And my second question would be, is Congo looking for like Western help though? Say they did want improvements in infrastructure, is Congo more on the opinion that they want to be like self-developing and not wanting Western help, or are they open for as because I've like heard different opinions on, I went to a few conferences and I've realized that different countries are on different opinions on what their stance on Western help is.
Can I answer the first question?
Yes.
With
Go
the first question you asked is about the economics and how technology is in Congo. Now, are you talking about how the resources in Congo are being used in our technology, or how the technology and infrastructure?
How it's currently building, like how is it advancing at a very, like as you mentioned before, that the infrastructure wasn't built, like they put a wall on the infrastructure so they couldn't communicate with each other. Well, currently, what is the state of infrastructure and technology?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll answer to a certain degree, but obviously Dr. Mukwege lives in Congo, so he has his own probably better perspective. But no, the nation is I think last count or the last thing I read, there was 300 miles of paved roads in Congo, or something ridiculously small like that. The infrastructure in Congo it's one of the lowest ranked in the UN indices of development. It used to be last. I think it's second to last now, third to last. It's incredibly poor. My time in the country, so much of my time in the country is listening to individuals when interviewing people and talking with them, the palpable frustration of lack of education, lack of water, lack of road, lack of health care. Now, you can travel into downtown Kinshasa, minus what's going on there right now, and you will definitely see some advances. You will definitely see some things improved. But the nation itself, considering the amount of money being made by external organizations, companies, etc., nations, and the condition of Congo, it is inexcusable. It is abhorrent. There is absolutely no reason for it whatsoever. And if you look at its neighboring country, Rwanda, and how quickly Rwanda has rebuilt itself, and the ways that it's rebuilt itself, we won't even get to or anything like that. But the resources of Rwanda are minuscule compared to those of Congo. And so, and we're only talking about minerals right now, but you also have the rainforest of Congo, you have the hydroelectric capabilities of Congo. Congo borders 12 different countries, so the trade possibilities. Congo could be the epicenter of Africa as far as an economic hub, as far as progress, as far as what it should be. And unfortunately, because of not only the lack of leadership, but because of the exploitation of these outside forces. Dr. Mukwege brought up the phones. Real quick, how many people here have heard of conflict minerals? I just want to make it quick. Okay, great. How many people here have heard of the issues of transparency and opaque mining deals? Okay, cool. Well, that's our next push. That's our next push. We're going to try to get that on the map as well. So what's happening, and I just want to be real clear on this before we turn it over to Dr. Mukwege. What's happening is that as these minerals are being used in our phones, in our electronic devices, as this copper is being used, copper is used in everything, in all the wiring in this building, in your car, in your plane. It's a strategic metal. It's one of the most important metals in the planet. Cobalt, it's a high alloy steel. It's necessary for all of our military industrial complex. Those things are incredibly valuable resources, and billions of dollars are being made off of them. But what's happening is that individuals, because the government of Congo they're state-owned mining companies. Gécamine is the largest one. It owns, quote unquote, the concessions of those mines. And then other actors will come in, go partner up with Gécamine, and value the mine at, let's say, we'll just use easy math, $2 billion, $2 million, $5 million, whatever it is. Then they will turn around and flip that mine to an external party for market value, which will be up to 800% of that. Those two companies will keep all of that revenue, and none of that money will go to the people of Congo, even though Gécamine, a state-owned mining company, belongs to the people of Congo. So the conflict minerals are an incredibly important storyline in Congo, but what's happening in the south is also an incredibly important storyline in Congo. And I know I'm swaying a little bit off of your question, but because you did mention technology, what is incredibly important to understand is that the technology that we thrive off today is coming at the cost of everything this man has to deal with and the Congolese people have to deal with. There is no way to separate the two. Nobody will stand up here and say, that's a direct, like, if you fix this, then everything he's dealing with will be fixed. That's not true. But you cannot separate the two. So if you want to talk about technology, we have to accept that as users of technology, as drivers of cars, as people sitting in buildings that are built like this, we have to understand that this building is built, our cars are built, our technology is built, our lives are built at the suffering of the Congolese women. And when Dr. Mukwege is saying these children whose bodies are being ruined, he's being incredibly diplomatic in his language. It is the worst thing you can possibly see as a human being. My daughter's standing in the back of the room. If somebody were to put their hands on her, I don't know as a human being what I could do. What this man has to endure and see on a daily basis is more than I could possibly handle. That's why I call him Superman. So we can't just think of it as, well, that sucks, they're getting robbed. We cannot think of it that way. We have to make the connection. You have to make the connection between what is happening in Congo and these multinational corporations making billions and billions of dollars. And they know what they're doing because J.D. Steer is a great campaign manager, screaming like hell saying, stand with Congo. You guys are making money off of this. They can't play dumb, but they're doing it. And so as students, as humanitarians, you have an opportunity to stand up. You have an opportunity to voice your opinion to your electronic device manufacturer. You have an opportunity to voice your opinion to your school. Can you imagine if the University of Michigan signed some kind of petition or said to Glencore, who's one of the worst actors in Congo, we're not gonna put our pension funds in any mutual fund or any organization that invests in Glencore. Glencore would shit its pants. That's what it takes. That's the connection I'm talking about. Dr. Mukwege can speak a lot more about the actual situation on the ground in Congo, and I want him to because the lack of technology is something that I know he struggles with all the time. But I can't let anybody leave this room without understanding how imperative those connections are.
Thank you. Je pense que lorsqu'on parle de la technologie au Congo aujourd'hui, et quand moi je voyage, je viens de visiter la salle ici, donc de l'expérimentation ou de pratique pour les accouchements.
So when one looks at the technology in Congo and then one travels here and sees some of the technologies, such as the simulation centers in the medical school where people simulate deliveries and other kinds of things like that.
Je crois que ce matin, quand je voyais cette stimulation, j'ai dit tout simplement, dans 10 ans, s'il n'y a rien qui est fait, nous, on sera déconnectés complètement à la science, à la technologie et à tout. Puisque quand vous voyez cette salle de stimulation, vous vous rendez compte que la technologie a atteint ici un niveau où nos autorités font tout que nous n'ayons pas accès à la technologie pour continuer à nous garder dans une position d'écraser la population, la dominer dans l'ignorance totale.
So when I see the technology here and I see how advanced it is, I realize that really our government and the people who are in control of us have been crushing the society. They've not been introducing us to this kind of technology, and they use the lack of access to technology to keep us in a state of in a state of really domination.
Je crois que quand les responsables qui sont en train de tuer les gens, les enfants de 8 ans dans la rue, puisque ils vont à l'école, ils trouvent les manifestants, on tire sur les manifestants et on tue les enfants, et que la réaction, par exemple, c'est couper l'Internet, couper la communication téléphonique, c'est pour montrer à quel point, lorsque vous entretenez des gens dans l'absence de la technologie, vous pouvez également les maîtriser, puisqu'ils ne savent pas, en fait, se mettre au même niveau que se trouve le monde aujourd'hui.
So when you see the people who are killing 8-year-old children in the streets who are trying to go to school or trying to demonstrate, and then after that they actually cut the internet lines and they cut communication lines, you realize that they really feel that they can be in control of the situation and not let people know what's going on at any state in the society.
Avec tous les prix que j'ai sur le plan mondial,
And among all the prizes that I've won globally,
je pense que je suis plus connu à Michigan que dans presque dans la capitale de mon pays.
I think of all the prizes I've won, and I think I'm actually better known here at the University of Michigan than I am in the capital of my own country.
Tout simplement puisque la technologie, ils font en sorte que tout ce qui peut permettre la communication est tout simplement empêcher et garder les gens dans l'ignorance.
So the government does everything they can to prevent communication access, and to keep people in a state of ignorance.
Je crois que pour terminer, je dois dire qu'aujourd'hui, j'ai l'impression que tous les droits fondamentaux sont violés au Congo et de façon permanente.
And to just finish up, I think I have to say that all human rights in the Congo are really suppressed in a position that's really permanent.
Le droit à la nourriture, que les gens ne se posent plus la question ailleurs, c'est devenu un gros problème Tout simplement parce que ceux qui sont en place, ils savent qu'affamer les gens, vous allez les contrôler plus facilement.
And even something as basic as food, the government understands that if they can keep people lack access to food, that's a way of controlling people who are famished.
Vous pouvez survoler le Congo 2000 km de forêt, et donc la possibilité d'avoir la nourriture est là. Nous avons les terres arables, que la réserve des terres arables mondiales, mais c'est là où il y a 50% d'enfants qui souffrent de la malnutrition.
So you can fly over 2,000 miles of the Congo and other areas where there's lots of land where things could be planted and things could be grown, and yet it's a country that has a huge number of children who are in a state of famine.
Et quand on sait les conséquences de la malnutrition sur le développement du cerveau pour les enfants, on se rend très bien compte que tout ce qui est fait, c'est détruire le reste de ce que Léopold II avait laissé.
So, and when you understand the importance of good nutrition on children's development, you understand that those kinds of basic lack of access to food is a fundamental way of suppressing everything else in society.
Parmi ces droits, je cite également le droit à l'éducation. Vous l'avez déjà dit. Je ne vois pas l'avenir au Congo avec le type d'éducation qu'il y a, s'il y a encore, puisque de toute façon, j'ai l'impression qu'il n'y a plus une éducation adaptée aux besoins du monde aujourd'hui.
So, and one of the other rights that's restricted is the rights to education, because I really don't see that there's an educational system in Congo that's adapted to current status, current national status, international levels.
Et donc, je pense que non seulement l'absence de technologie amène à une destruction totale, mais ça amène aussi à des violations graves de droits fondamentaux de la population. Malheureusement, c'est fait à bon escient, c'est fait consciencieusement pour permettre de contrôler la population.
Not only do I see this lack of technology as destructive, but I see it as a way of fundamentally violating human rights of the population.
Okay, so I know some of you have a 12 o'clock class. What I'd like to do is I've seen 3 hands. If you could each ask your question, and we can get them out on the table, and then you can respond. Okay, so you had a question?
Yes.
But,
my question is, I know you mentioned the company that mines there. Where is the company based out of? And what area in the Congo is the mine located? And in the Congolese people that work in those mines, do they earn a wage, or would you consider that modern day slavery if they're not earning a wage working in the mines?
okay, and there was a question. Let's get all the questions on the table. Oh, you're good? There was one over here? Yeah. Oh, 2 over here. Okay.
C'est ceux qui travaillent dans les...
Bonjour, je voudrais demander une question en français, s'il vous plaît. J'ai une question. Je m'appelle Valeria. Je suis une étudiante de la justice de l'environnement. Et I can repeat in English if you'd like, but I'm curious. Actually, I'll just say it in English about how your medical community copes with the vicarious trauma of the work that you do.
And one last question, and then we'll get a response.
So you very eloquently talked about how we can, as consumers, put pressure on both companies like Apple, who are actually producing products, and also on mining companies like Glencore. But what do responsible business practices for these mining companies like Glencore, what does that actually look like for both for the community and for the company? So when we are putting pressure on companies like Glencore, what are we actually asking them to do to change, like within their supply chains or within the actual mines, to actually improve not only the conditions of the workers in the mines, but also like for the rest of the DRC, if that's even possible?
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to keep it relatively short.
Absolutely. I'll be real quick. First to the living wages in the mines. I think the average wage last time I checked was like $2 a day. Which in Congo can be a living wage, but no, it's the equivalent of slave labor. Like, there's no safety regulations, there's no health plan. I've been in the mines. It's very difficult. It's very dangerous. But it does provide an opportunity to make some cash. So of course people will take it when there's no other opportunity. They're gonna do what they have to do, just like this country did back in the day when it was developing. So you could definitely, and it's children in the mines, all of that. So we certainly won't. We'll equate it. I won't call it slave labor because not in all cases, because that's not what it's been defined as. But absolutely abhorrent working conditions. And to the latter question, very very good question. That's got a longer answer, but I will answer it briefly. The OECD, Organization of Economic and Cultural Development, I believe that's the acronym, has put out some guidelines. And other organizations have put out guidelines. This is what it looks like. So with supply chain responsibility, what that means for the companies, tungsten, tin, tantalum, and gold would have been called conflict minerals. What that means is that they know that they have supply chain responsibility. It was in Section 1502 of the Dodd-Frank bill, that from the mine to their phone, their device, they know the entire supply chain. And they can say that there was no slavery in the supply chain. They can say that there was no conflict caused by the minerals that came from the supply chain. And if they can't, then they have to say this part was not known, X, Y, and Z was not known. So at least it's on record. So at least consumers and activists have an opportunity to say, hey, corporation X, Y, and Z, you have these holes in your supply chain, you need to clean it up. As far as transparency goes, that's exactly what we're pushing for, is that these opaque deals, because what will happen is that this gentleman comes in here and he's going to buy a mine from this gentleman right here, and they'll do a transaction in the BVI with the BVI organization, British Virgin Island-based organization that has no transparency requirements, and nobody will know who's involved in that company. It could be the president of the country, it could be the president's wife, nobody knows how much money was paid to them. It's all opaque. So that those of us who want to know what happened, what went down, where'd all this money go, who'd all this money go to, we can't say it. So nobody can be held accountable for it. So we don't know if this gentleman's doing illicit practices. Maybe he gave all the money to build a school, or maybe he gave all the money to the president. We don't know. And so transparency is the key word in that. That we're not saying don't do business in Congo by any means. Of course do business in Congo. Make it transparent. Let us see the money. Let us see where the money goes so that the Congolese can hold their elected officials responsible if they are doing things that are illegal or illicit. And last thing before I turn it over to Dr. Mukwege, most people left, but we do have a campaign, Stand with Congo. You can go to the website. You can sign up to the petition, et cetera. That will help us get those kinds of voices to say to all of these companies and organizations, this many people are saying, damn it, be transparent. Have supply chain responsibility. That makes a difference. You guys are consumers. You guys are important. They care what you think. Dr. Mukwege, feel free, please, sir.
Je crois que par rapport à cette transparence, je ne vais pas revenir, je vais être très rapide. On avait mené une campagne et nous avions eu la loi Frank Dodd qui est très très bien connue. C'était un succès peut-être à moitié. Nous avons mené la même campagne en Europe où nous avions eu l'Europe a voté une loi alors qu'ils voulaient faire une loi qui était tout à fait libre. Donc, au lieu de faire donc tu devrais jouer avec ta conscience. Et là, nous nous sommes battus. Nous avons une loi qui est un tout petit peu contraignante. Mais aujourd'hui, je dois vous dire que nous sommes au point de reculer par rapport à la loi Frank Dodd, puisque les compagnies ont un lobbying qui est fort. Et devant ce lobbying fort, la force de vous, les consommateurs, de vous, les défenseurs des droits humains, on a besoin de cette force.
So let me just comment a little bit on the transparency. The Frank Dodd law got us a little way forward. It was worthwhile. It was certainly useful, and the European Union also has had some laws that have worked on some of these areas. But we need to be careful because there's a huge lobby now to pull back Frank Dodd. There are lots of economic forces and lobbying forces that are trying to retrench these even small advances. And we need advocates and voices and human rights advocates to speak in favor of these laws so that they can continue and not be taken away.
Peut-être rapidement, en ce qui concerne le personnel ou la communauté médicale, comment elle est affectée, je vais être très court pour vous dire, quand vous voyez ce que le corps médical est obligé de voir en République démocratique du Congo, nous sommes obligés de les soutenir par des psychologues, puisque le corps médical est traumatisé lui-même par ce qu'il voit.
So with respect to the question about the medical community and how it's affected by this, I have to say that we have to provide psychological resources to the medical community because it's also traumatized by what it sees, and they need psychological support because it's so horrific for them.
Et là, je crois que c'est une responsabilité que moi, comme responsable médical, je sens toujours. Je vois engager des gens, et puis par rapport à ce qu'ils voient, tu vois quelqu'un qui fond et qui devient incapable de faire quoi que ce soit à cause du traumatisme par rapport à ce qu'il vit.
So one of my jobs as a physician in charge and as a leader is to make sure and pay attention to these people who start to fail because of what they see, and they're incapable of continuing to work because of the trauma that they're involved with psychologically.
Le drame le plus grave que j'avais connu, c'est lorsque une de mes infirmières était menacée pendant 3 mois pour le travail qu'elle faisait, puisqu'elle soutenait les victimes, elle était assistante sociale, et on avait promis qu'on va la violer pour l'empêcher de continuer à travailler.
So one of the worst things that I saw was one of our nurses who for 3 months was menaced. She was threatened by people who didn't want her to work for us, didn't want her involved in these kinds of activities, and in fact threatened that they would rape her if she continued to do the kind of work that she was doing.
Et cette femme, elle avait été violée. Pendant 48 heures, elle a été enlevée, violée, on l'a retrouvée en coma. Et tous les efforts que nous avions faits devant la justice pour qu'il y ait une investigation, ça n'a jamais apporté quoi que ce soit.
And this person we actually found was assaulted over 48 hours. We found her in a coma, and when we went to the courts and tried to get any kind of judicial action, absolutely nothing happened. There was no judicial response whatsoever to what had happened to her.
Et vous comprenez que ça doit être très traumatisant pour le corps médical qui essaie d'aider les gens, qui voient dans des conditions déplorables et qui se disent ça aussi ça peut m'arriver puisque tout simplement j'aide les autres.
So you can imagine how terrible it must be for the medical community who thinks, oh my gosh, this could happen to me, having seen what's happening to other kinds of people.
Merci.
Thanks.
So I would like to take this time now to thank our guests for making the effort to come and visit us here, and to thank all of you for being here. And to remember that students actually made a huge difference in labor standards and human rights across the globe. And we could take more action at the university level to be addressing this issue. So I encourage you to be thinking about that over the time that you are here at Michigan. Thank you very much.